speaking of, is there anything on that Excel spreadsheet, that fancy spreadsheet that gives you all the numbers, that you still track, that you still think matters?
Not a single one. I think it all matters. It's just a matter of trying to identify how it works for the individual. So I was using like the acute chronic work ratio for a period of time, and I was just using total weekly volume and then monthly volume, and just kind of getting the ratio that way. And what I started to realize was that ratio was just all over the place. Like, we would taper if we're testing 17 to 22 days out from a competition. We'd start tapering down from there, and you'd get into the really low ends of load, and then all of a sudden you get that spike on competition day. Nobody's getting hurt on competition day. Some lifters, the ratio got up there pretty high, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, and they just, it didn't even seem like they were working hard in training. So this was more submaximal volume work when we were doing it at this time, and like, they weren't getting hurt. And then there were times where literally far out from a meet, I would just kind of run baseline and just kind of manipulate other variables, and people would get fucked up a little bit. And it's like, it was all over the place. There was so much noise that I just, and it could have been I'm using external measures, which, they're arbitrary numbers until you actually put them within the context of the individual themselves. But it just wasn't working for me. And like, what I think was happening too is, like, even though I started to realize that the data wasn't complete and wasn't telling me what I wanted it to tell me, it was still influencing my decisions. So like, these spreadsheets were pretty big and they're color coded. So like greens and yellows and reds, and even if I have this conscious awareness of what this data is actually telling me, there's definitely subconscious bias being driven by the colors of the sheet alone, my past experiences. Like, me as a coach, it works the same way as a lifter. Like, my past experiences, my emotions, my beliefs, they're going to go into the decision making I'm making for that individual in front of me. And I felt that the sheet was literally that bias was negatively affecting my decision making process.
When you said that you were tracking volume with the AC ratios, was that just tonnage?
So for the AC ratios, that was just tonnage. I did take, this sheet had average intensities for each lift, total number of lifts, total number of competition lifts, so that weren't variations. The acute chronic work ratio, it had a breakdown of what percentage of the total tonnage came from bench, squat, deadlift. It had a lot.
I've had a 3-month running email conversation with Eric Lagoy about implementing the AC ratios into the barbell sport, and I come back to the point that we can't currently, because the data, the ratio itself, you can do it, but the numbers won't be based on anything, because 0.8 to 1.5 is based on field sport athletes, and it's based on SRPE times time. So if you're not looking at field sports, or you're not using the same metric, then 0.8 to 1.5 does not apply to the population. So you would have to make your own AC ratio studies. You'd have to analyze your own data prospectively, and track your injuries and see if there are any risk factors for that. So that's like what Eric and I have been talking about, because I've tried to use it as well at our gym, and same problems. It's not telling us anything that's useful to inform us for future training right now, but it is freaking us out. And it's making us not want to do stuff, or it's making us think that we should be pushing them harder, even though subjectively they're telling us they feel like shit, and objectively we can just see weight on the bars decreasing. Oh, but your AC ratio is low for whatever reason. I still cling on to the hope that we can figure out these metrics, like which ones really matter. But I think it's got to be have to be some like individual approach with certain metrics for this individual, but for whatever reason, these metrics are what matter for this individual, and we're just so far from that.